Greetings, honored listener, and welcome back to my show. My name is Alex. I'm an author and digital artist, and you're listening to ActiveImagine, a podcast from artists dedicated to artists, as well as their journeys, their creative process, expression, and their relationship with the great unconscious, the realm where art comes from. Today, I'm bringing you a conversation with Raoul MacCamley, a professional digital artist and musician. We'll be discussing his career, the evolution of his relationship to art, and we'll delve into his thoughts on AI art. And as usual, we'll also discuss the implications of technology in the world of art and what advice can young artists take from this. I've had the pleasure and honor to speak with Raoul many times across the past years, and his own channel over at Deaf Hippie, which I will link in the description below, has been one of the inspirations for me to start this channel here and this podcast. So if you decide to check it out, you'll find lots of fascinating interviews there with professionals from various backgrounds. So I invite you to have a look. I will also link his music channel over at Attention Label. And that's where you'll find all of the albums he has released and his vast collection of independently produced music, as well as illustrated covers. Similarly to me, Raoul has been merging different creative expressions into one. And this was also one of the reasons that I was very excited to have this conversation with him and to bring it over to you. As usual, if you would like to support me and the artists featured here, please check out the links below. And if you'd like to also follow this conversation over on Spotify, please look up ActiveImagine on that platform. I'll make sure to update it with each episode as it comes out. But this here on YouTube will be the first place where you will find them. So let's get into it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for
me.
being here. How are you feeling today?
Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Yeah, I feel good. I feel like the older I get, or the more I like move through life, the more I'm just aware of like how time is running out.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that's quite the start.
Need to get shit done, It's like there's not that much time to do
Mm,
things. And you can only do so many things. I feel like I'm constantly running out of time these days. But it's making me
yeah.
focus on like what I need to get done basically.
Yeah, I can relate to that. So let's let's start with a little introduction for
Oh,
everybody else. So if you'd like to say who you are and what do you do and how long have you been doing it for?
yeah, sure. I kind of don't really know like how to talk to people about what I do a lot of the time, because when people ask me what I do for work, I don't always know. I'm sure you can relate to that. Like, I don't always know what to actually say because I do different things. So do you.
Mhm.
And how do you explain to people when you're like an artist, especially, and you do lots of different things,
Mm.
like you illustrate and write, among other things. And I would label myself as an artist. I produce music and I illustrate, but more and more these days, as you know, I'm getting into uh, psychedelic facilitation, and I want to do that more and more professionally, which is holding sessions for people that involve magic mushrooms
Mhm.
and maybe other psychedelics down the line. Who knows? But I identify more and more with like psychedelic facilitation as opposed to the label artist, even though I do label myself an artist. So it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to like boil it down to one word or one label or like, you know, in terms of identity, professional
Mm.
identity and whatnot.
So let's maybe if we narrow it down on your brand, which is attention.
Yeah,
Um, and if I go on your website and take in consideration the information that's there, you have illustration, music production, and communication. So would you say these three kind of elements fall under the brand, which is called attention?
yeah. So my artist label is Attention. That's the name of it, and that's the like artistic side of what I do professionally, which is
Mhm.
illustration, music production, and communication is something that I'm working on. I want to get, I want to become, uh, I want to use the word excellent. I want to get good at communicating and, you know, telling stories and even just visually, like painting a picture visually that's compelling. That to me is communication. Um, but it's weird because these days I feel myself I've been changing so much as a person over the past kind of year, 2 years, and I feel myself like detaching from the artist identity that I used to really hold dear to myself, that I used to really like kind of cling to. And more nowadays, I'm like trying to build a different personal identity that's less like the artist associated with my label called Attention and more with something else that I'm not quite sure what that is yet, what the other thing is, but it's like what I was saying before about psychedelic facilitation and wanting to do that more and being in that world more because it feels more human to me. Like a lot of my work as an artist is sitting at a desk behind a screen, ultimately, like whether it's producing music or illustrating on Photoshop. And it doesn't really involve like other humans. It's just me in a room, like working in front of a computer, which is okay some of the time, but more and more I'm realizing that I don't really want that to be my life, you know, as much
Mhm.
as I do love creating.
So would you say that attention is evolving in some way,
Yeah, definitely evolving,
transitioning?
definitely transitioning. And yeah, so much is changing. Even in the world, it's like as artists with everything that's changing in the world, with regards to technology and just access to information and whatnot, the tools that are available now. I know you wanted to talk about AI maybe later on, but you know,
Yeah.
all the stuff with AI, um, the world is changing so fast, and there's kind of you kind of have to evolve or die. And I don't necessarily mean only as an artist, but kind of as a person. You want to move and grow with the times. So that looks different for each individual, but I'm definitely feeling these days like I need to evolve, you know.
Hmm. Hmm. So, given where you are now, if we were to sort of have a look at the timeline that led you to today, to where you are now, and if we were to cast our eye, so to speak, in the past to where it kind of all started, um, what would you say was the beginning of your artistic uh, propensity, so to speak, or like where when you first got the idea or the inclination that you wanted to become an artist, a professional artist? When did that start, and how did it start for you?
I was raised like in a very creative family,
Mm.
and we weren't allowed to really watch much TV. So we kind of had to stay busy with creative activities like drawing and coloring and like dressing up and playing, creative games that didn't involve screens. And so that was like the foundation that my parents gave me and my siblings. And then my like dream as a but for most of my childhood and teenage years, my dream was to join the army, like the British Army, and be an officer. And then one day when I was, well, not one day, there was like a whole build up of inner kind of turmoil and change of like just existential questioning when I was around 16, 17, that led to the realization that I was getting more and more into music, and I was playing in a heavy metal band in high school, and I was like playing guitar every day, and I really wanted to be a musician. And I came to a realization that I couldn't join the army and be an officer and be like a musician to any serious degree. So I made a painful at the time. It was a very painful decision to like, because I wanted both as badly as each other. Like I wanted to join the army, but I also really wanted to be a musician. But I felt like I couldn't do both fully. So I made a choice to pursue music, and ultimately art over a career in the military, which
Hmm.
which then led me to go to university to study music, which didn't in some ways it didn't go very well because I dropped out twice. But in hindsight, I don't regret that at all. And I would say that it actually did go well because I spent my time in university being creative and learning how to produce music and, you know, making good friends and stuff like that. So it was a productive time, but I ultimately didn't, pursue a study in music. And that's kind of that was like the turning point in terms of pursuing art seriously.
Hmm. Hmm. So it kind of what you said about the military mixed with the musical side, it sort of reminds me of this role or job that I guess it used to exist. Unfortunately, unfortunately, it doesn't anymore. Of the the musicians that travel with the army
Yeah,
to hype up the army as it goes to war, and they play drums and
yeah. That still exists to some degree, but it's only
does
in
it?
like ceremonial kind of parade settings. It's not actually
Oh yeah.
like on a field of battle. But yeah, yeah, I get where you're coming from. I love that image. I love it in movies, like
Mhm.
historical, like war movies, when you see, war drummers or just war chanting. At the beginning of that Ridley Scott movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe,
Mhm.
when the Romans are going to fight these barbarians, or I can't remember if it's in Britain or in Gaul in like ancient France, but you see the barbarians kind of like chanting and just like shouting and stuff and hyping themselves up to for battle. I love scenes like that because that's so primal. And the New Zealand like haka.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same thing. It's like it's basically music. I mean, it's chanting, but it's basically like hyping themselves up for battle, and it's so like primal and powerful. I love shit like that.
Would you say uh that type of mm, relation to music or that type of art, musical expression, let's call it, is that something that is inspiring to you and has been inspiring to you in a way for your for the music that you've created? Or if you have any other inspirations for your music, I'd be interested in hearing them.
Yeah, there's so many. Is the first part of your question relating specifically to kind of military or militaristic kinds of music?
Yeah, I think it could be connected well to what you were describing before, given your history.
Yeah. I mean, my background in music, like my I was raised very Catholic, and we weren't allowed to listen to like rock and roll at home, let alone heavy metal. So of course, like in secret, I would like find ways to listen to heavy metal, and eventually, like I mentioned before, ended up playing in a heavy metal band in high school. And heavy metal and like heavy music are a very big part of my like artistic background, because I found a strong sense of identity in the subculture of heavy metal and heavy music and rock and roll, and it has so much attitude and so much energy, and it's so like, what's the word, unapologetic, it's so like raw and sexy and kind of
Hmm.
dangerous and like fuck you, there's so much attitude. And that's exciting to me because you can translate that into illustration and other forms of art, and even like your personality, not necessarily walk around like, like being a dick and like pretending like you don't care about anything, like some kind of rock and roll celebrity, but just the outlook and the subject matter that's sometimes darker, that's sometimes more kind of edgy, that kind of
Hmm.
rock and roll attitude you can translate into so many different forms of creative expression. But like musical background thing, it's funny as well because I was talking about the New Zealand haka,
Yeah.
the kind of dance haka. Uh, and my dad was really into rugby. And so as a kid, whenever my dad watched rugby, we'd often like just watch with him because we were like, we didn't know any better. And um, it was just something to do because we didn't watch a lot of TV. So if he put the rugby on, we would just watch it with him. But like the point is that when the All Blacks would play, which is the New Zealand national team, before they start a game of rugby, they perform a haka. And my dad, who's very religious, would like turn off the volume while they were performing the haka because he believed it was like a demonic, like an evil kind of display. And that planted the seed in me of like fascination with this kind of raw, primal, like chanting, essentially musical. Like there's no instruments, it's just guys like shouting and performing a choreography. But to me, that's musical because it's rehearsed, it has meaning, it has lyrics, it's a performance. And yeah, something about that is like it kind of straddles the line between art and just human, I don't know, like humanity, it's like such a raw form of communication.
Hmm. You mentioned meaning as well, which is uh, very, very fundamental, I think, especially when we talk about art and nowadays. And I definitely want to touch upon that a bit more. But what would you say is mm, do you, or rather, what kind of meaning would you attribute to the music that you've created in the past couple of years? Or I don't know if that's the kind of relationship that you have with it, or if there was a meaning for it as a goal. Did you have, did you want it to mean something, or do you still want it to mean something nowadays for the specifically about music where I'm referring here?
Specifically,
Yeah.
I think for a long time, I wanted to be a professional musician or a professional music producer. And only recently, in the recent months, has that kind of started to shift for me, where um, kind of like the painful shift I experienced that I mentioned before when I was a teenager and I made a decision to pursue music and art rather than a career in the military. Uh, just over a decade later, I'm experiencing a similar kind of painful shift where I'm actually questioning if that's what I really want to be a professional musician or professional music producer. So with your
Mm.
question relating to meaning, for a long time the meaning was to try and make that my career.
Hmm.
Although there is something I've thought about a lot too, which is that I produced quite a lot of music over the years. And for a while I was making a song every week, uh,
Hmm.
for like quite a while, like 2, 3 years, something like that, a song every week. And looking back at a lot of what I've produced, and there's like a few full studio length albums that I've produced as well. They're all like, each song and each album is like a journal entry to a specific period of my life. So it's kind of useful to have these reference points. They're very evocative and they're very emotionally charged. So when I listen to like an old song that I made, 5 or 6 years ago, it's like a time capsule into my own story, into my own past. And when I listen to it, and I don't really listen to my own music very often, it's kind of once in a blue moon, I'll, randomly just wander back through my old material, almost out of curiosity. And it always like brings up memories and old emotions. And it's like, oh yeah, like that's where I was kind of mentally or emotionally back then. And so that's meaningful to me, in that it's like a very special kind of, yeah, like a like journal back through time, or a series of time capsules. That's kind of cool to have that.
Hmm. Hmm. There's um there's a lot of I would say influences that I perceive through your music, through the albums that you've released. Um, there's there's one that's well, there's actually a few that are that reference movies and video games as well, like the sort of the cyberpunk one that you made,
Yeah.
and then there's a track I think which was inspired by the was it Wonder Woman, or was it like a Hans Zimmer uh
It was inspired by the Wonder Woman trailer, the
right.
trailer for the Wonder Woman movie that Hans Zimmer scored. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this is very interesting. Um, would you like to like touch a little bit upon that, like in terms of your the genres that kind of let's say flow through the music that you've produced in the past, through those albums, and the themes and the emotions that are at the basis, are at the foundations of the music that you've produced so far. Because obviously there's Hans Zimmer, and there's that sort of there's a power to it, right? There's kind of like a bold um, expression of strength in a way, or like power, like dramatic, dark
Mm,
uh rhythms which characterizes Hans Zimmer's music,
mhm.
which I also absolutely love. Um, so would you like to touch a little bit upon that? Also, I would say it's also like in relation to your brand as well, which is attention, right? And it's got this, it's very bold, it's very striking, kind of like the music.
Yeah, well, like you only have so much time to create an impression, and you want to like, as an artist, your job is to kind of make people feel something. And different kinds of art, successful art, to me, successful art is any piece of art that makes you feel uh a strong emotion. That to me is like successful art. And so with music, there's so much music out there nowadays. Like, there's never been the barrier to entry for making and publishing music has never been as low as it is now, which I think is a good thing because it means that everyone or more people than ever have access to that means of expression, to like produce music, to put it out there, to share it, to for other people to listen to what they've made. I think that's very liberating. I mean, like the cost of producing music just a few decades ago was it was just not accessible for the average person. Like you had to rent a music studio and a mix engineer and like instruments, and you had to have a band and rehearsal space, and it was just so much more work and so much more money to make music. Um, Not to go on too much of a tangent, but the point is that now that you can now that you can make music so much more easily than before, you can say what you have to say and you can share what you feel in a much more direct way. And that's something that I've loved about my journey with music production and making music and even performing music back when I used to sometimes play music live, which I haven't done in a long time, but you can, it's such a direct means of conveying emotion. And in produced music, like a lot of the music that I've produced that's often inspired by, movie soundtracks or that is essentially a soundtrack.
Hmm.
Um, like a couple of the albums that I've produced are basically movie soundtracks. You can you can like lay out in such you can lay out the emotion that you want to convey or that you want your listener to feel in such an undeniable way. Like you mentioned Hans Zimmer. When you listen to Hans Zimmer's music, it's undeniable what you're supposed to feel. It's like everything just hits so hard. The percussion that he uses, the orchestral arrangement, everything just smacks you in the face. And when you listen to Hans Zimmer's music, it's just impossible not to feel roused, because his emotional language is so bold and powerful and confident. And when you listen to his music, you're just like, yeah, I know I know what this music is trying to say. Obviously everyone has a subjective experience when they listen to a piece of music, but ultimately
Hmm.
it's pretty clear what's going on when you listen to a piece of music by Hans Zimmer, because it's so, like, you use the word powerful. It's just powerful. And it's not trying to pretend to be something it's not. Like a lot of art nowadays can sometimes seem a little pretentious or a little kind of contrived because it's not always clear what the artist is actually trying to say sometimes. But with music like Hans Zimmer's, which I'm also like extremely inspired by, and that I've like tried to emulate basically many times with my own with my own style of music production. It's not abstract, it's not contrived. It's like, this is what's going on. Boom, big drums. Boom, like big choir, big strings. Um, it's just so easy to get into that world. And I think if you can do that in music or in art in general, where you just bring someone to an emotional experience in a direct way, then that's success. And that, in my opinion, like should be the goal of any artist. The most direct route to getting your audience to feeling something strong.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, it's transmuting emotion directly into music. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, transforming emotion and communicating emotion through the channel of music. Of course, I guess we could make the argument that that's what art has always been about. Um, and in in relation to this, I think the theme of meaning comes back again, with my previous guest on the show, we kind of touched upon the idea of meaning, especially in the context of today's world and the art of today, and of course the the AI and the things that it's producing, and the overwhelming amount of content that it's pumping out, and that it seems that it has no meaning. Or I think that that's definitely one of the points that can be made about it. And so I'm curious to know how you feel about that, and what you kind of think about that. Now, obviously, we were discussing mainly AI art in terms of the generated images, but I'm pretty sure, although I'm not entirely clued up on what it's doing on the musical front. But when I tried to Google the other day, uh, AI music to like create tracks, I found the first page of Google absolutely filled with so many different websites that all feel and look exactly the same, offering subscription models for essentially creating your own tracks with the help of AI. So that means that anyone and everyone can do it. Obviously, there are so many different apps and companies that are trying to capitalize on it as quickly as possible. They all want a slice of the cake. Um, and yeah, this is just it's we're I guess we're at the point where this is growing exponentially, and everyone wants a piece of it, which means that there is so much content that is happening, that is being created out there, and so much of this content is created by people. As I said, I don't know exactly how it works, how the AI works when it comes to music. I have no idea on the on the way that it functions, on the way that it was created. But I'm assuming that the goal is for anyone to be able to create their own tracks without the need to maybe hire a musician, which is one of the same kind of issues that are happening in the world of concept art and just traditional 2D digital illustration. So one of the things that I kind of want to discuss on the show is the impact of that, and how do artists feel about that. So I'm not sure if this has had any impact on you, but I'm curious to know how you feel about all this, especially in relation to the topic of meaning that we've touched upon before.
AI?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, AI is I understand why it's scary to a lot of people, because it's so it's not new in the grand scheme of things, because a like research surrounding AI has existed for decades, but like the extent to which we have access to AI now, and the like capabilities that AI has now, are unparalleled. And they are it's a lot to process. So I understand why it's scary to a lot of people. And there's a lot of truth in, I mean, people like nowadays, people talk a lot about how AI is going to potentially put a lot of people out of work, or replace a lot of jobs. And I see like the reality in that. But it's, in my opinion, AI, there's no stopping this train. I mean, you can't like stop a river from running. It's going to keep flowing forwards. You can't just stand in front of a river and hold up your hands and say stop. Like you're just going to get smacked by the water. I don't know, that's maybe not the best analogy, but it's not going to go away is my point. It's not going anywhere. And so we have to adapt and we have to evolve with it, or get left behind. And I don't know, like necessarily what that looks like exactly, because I think every individual has to figure out their own relationship with the world, not only technology, not only AI, but with AI specifically, it's it's not inherently good or bad. It's a tool that you can use to your advantage, if you choose to see it that way. Um, just like the internet is a tool that you can use to your advantage or that you can use to essentially waste your time with. It depends what your attitude is and what your approach is. But it is scary and it is very new, and it is unclear what the future looks like, especially for artists. And like, yeah, there's a lot of AI generated art, and something that I've like I don't feel concerned about it because
Mm.
um I see it as a tool, and it's very powerful, and it can be used to really like improve your workflow and your efficiency, on a lot of levels, not just producing art, but just kind of in life. So that I'm like excited about, because that's actually useful, and it can save you a lot of time. But also I don't feel concerned because there's always going to be, in my opinion, a need and a yearning for the human touch. And I don't know, I'm not necessarily only talking about art, but just in general, people want something that's real and that's human, and that has soul, and that comes from, you know, physical hands, and that comes from an actual person. Um, that's also one of the reasons well, it's one of the reasons that I'm drawn more and more to working with people and things like psychedelic facilitation, because that's a human exchange. It's a human relationship. It's a human interaction, and you can't really synthesize that with AI, because you're actually in the room with a person or people, and you're actually having a conversation, and that's real and human, and you actually feel good. Like the brain releases endorphins when you have an actual face-to-face conversation with someone that's going well, and you have an actual connection with people. Like your brain actually loves that, and you can't synthesize that with AI. So my point is just that um, AI is a tool. I think it has its place, and I think it won't replace everything, because we'll always want the real deal, um, in various aspects of life.
Hmm. So do you have the faith in a way that humanity as a collective will feel the need for human connection despite our current uh, undeniable link, and I would say it's almost like a merging with technology that is happening right now. I think there's a um, there is this philosophical uh, idea that I think I can't exactly remember what it was called. It was a transhumanism or something. The merging of man and machine, essentially. And we can make the argument that in some way that has already happened, given our relationship with the internet, for example, and with technology. I mean, we spend most of our time of the day online. Even when we're not in front of our laptops, we're in front of our phones. So much of our lives and so much of our time is connected to this digital space. And in terms of that, in terms of this lifestyle, this is kind of where AI feels to me very overwhelming, because our brains are subjected to such an overwhelming stream of information and of data that is coming at us. And it was true even before AI, but now I feel like it's even more, you know. So would you say that you have that faith that humanity as a collective will recognize that, and will recognize that the true value is outside of this digital world that we live in, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of faith. I feel very optimistic because I'll give you an example. Like, you can go online and look at a photo or even a video or even like a virtual reality, video experience of being in nature, like being in the mountains. You can look up ultra high definition drone footage of like, the mountains in a country you've never been to. You can see that on a screen, and that might be nice. It might feel nice, and you might enjoy that, and it's like nice footage and it looks good and it's enjoyable. But like, compare that to actually being in that place physically, like being in that forest or in those mountains in real life, and actually seeing that view a from from a cliff, or actually feeling that fresh air, being in those trees, smelling the leaves. That experience compared to seeing it on a screen, for example, or even in virtual reality, there's such a it's so much more powerful in real life. And our brains evolved with, nature and human connection and communication, and like making fire, and we have these ties to the real raw experiences of life. And as much as synthesizing them with AI or other like technological means can also bring us like entertainment, pleasure, you know, education, even, they're useful tools, but we'll always want deep inside the true connection to the earth, the true connection to other humans. It's another example is like, you can have a phone call with someone that you care a lot about through WhatsApp, and that might be nice. But then if you actually see them in person and you go for coffee together and you actually hang out in person together, the feeling is so different. It feels so much stronger when you're actually physically with that person, even though it's like very useful to speak with someone on social media, especially if you live far apart and you can't see each other physically very often. That's a very useful tool and it's really nice, but it's even better when you're in person. And so, yeah, to me that just goes back to my point of like, the we'll always need the real deal, and we'll always yearn for the real deal. And if you're shopping for if you have disposable income and you want to spend a few thousand like dollars on a nice painting, in my opinion, someone is more likely to want to buy a real painting that a human painted rather than something that a robot produced. Maybe not 100% of the time, but I think more often than not. That would be my guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Especially, yeah, in regards to painting. Um, I feel like maybe there's a lot of artists out there that feel the same fear. Um, just focusing on the industry of on the art industry, or on the on the specifically the music and art industry. Say, for example, if there is If there's a young person, a young artist that's just starting out, and they're trying to navigate this complex world, especially with the rise of AI, as we've discussed before, and maybe they feel like there's no point anymore to even try and and get somewhere with it, right? So maybe they want to do music, maybe they want to uh, have a career in digital art or in painting, and given the rise of the robots that can now reproduce these same results much faster than we can, uh, what advice would you give, or what thoughts can you share in relation to that for someone like that that's maybe listening to this and feels, in the best of circumstances, confused, and in the worst of circumstances, frightened uh, by the new world, the current world, I guess, and its angles and complexity and um, just oh the labyrinth. It's almost like a labyrinth. I kind of see it like a like a labyrinth, like a very shiny, very bright, very blinding labyrinth in a way.
So are you asking how to find meaning in an overwhelming world where maybe the technology that exists makes it harder to justify being an artist?
Yeah, in a way, yes, yeah. And if you have any thoughts to share about that for like someone that is younger than us and that's just starting out, and they're looking for a reason essentially to keep making art and to hope that there's a way to make a living out of it.
Something that I'm doing, that I'm practicing, and that's helping me is really to detach as much as possible from the overwhelming web of information and technology that is the internet and social media. To really try and detach as much as possible from it, because, and I don't mean to like pretend it doesn't exist and to pretend that, AI doesn't exist or whatever, but the more time you spend like connected to all of this stuff that's happening in the world, the news and like technology, and like this is happening, and this new thing exists, and social media, and all of this noise, like your brain can only handle so much input, and when you're exposing yourself to a lot of information, then it becomes overwhelming because you can only process so much at a time, and you have less mental energy to do your own thing, because so much of it has been spent just being connected to all of this information that's around you, that's so easily accessible online. And for me, like taking a step back and spending less time on social media and spending less time staying up to date with all the news surrounding technology and the world at large, uh, nurturing that distance, and finding and creating more space for myself to just do what I need to do to feel balanced and stable as much as possible as a person. Something that I've really learned over the past couple of years is that you can easily spread yourself too thin if you're trying to do too many things at once, too many like projects at once. But that also applies to how you spend your mental energy in any given day. And if you're putting things into your brain that are challenging for you to process, then it means you have less energy left over to create or to do things that you want to do or to be original with, your work. So I'm not saying necessarily that people should operate in a vacuum and not know what's going on in the world or online or with regards to technology and advances and all of that stuff. But um, finding meaning is a very personal journey, and you need space and you need time with yourself, detached from outside input to find clarity. It's also like useful to have perspectives, outside perspectives, and to speak to other people. And like, there's a lot of tools online that I use that help me with my own search for meaning in life. But yeah, trying to make more space for oneself and more time for oneself, detached from the internet and detached from social media. That's what I'm going with at the moment, and I'm finding that helpful.
Mm-hmm. In terms of tools, is there anything that you would particularly recommend to help with this detachment, both online or offline?
Something that only recently, like a few days ago, I've become aware of and started kind of exploring is this idea of metacognition. Have you heard of that before?
I'm not sure. Please do explain.
There's this guy. He's not the only guy who talks about it, but he's one of the most kind of eloquent thinkers when it comes to the idea of metacognition. This guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza. He talks
Oh,
about,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I know of him. Yeah.
okay, you're aware of him. So yeah, like metacognition, essentially, as I understand it, it's only been a few days that I've been exposed to this idea actually, but as I understand it, can be summarized as questioning your own thoughts and questioning whether you believe the things that you thought you believed about yourself and about the world. Um, like sometimes you hold beliefs or thoughts that you may have held for years and years and years that you just take for granted because they're a part of the patterns that your brain operates in. And metacognition is a tool where you can question your own thought patterns and be like, wait, do I really believe that still? Or wait, like, where does that come from? And you can choose to think differently or believe different things by basically like taking a step back and being more objective about your own beliefs and your own thought patterns. And that to me ties in with the search for meaning, because sometimes you believe things about yourself or your value in the world or just the world around you or your relationship with other people. Sometimes those beliefs that you hold and that you may have held for years actually hold you back. And I know that I've held myself back for many years through self-limiting beliefs that stem from, insecurities, often childhood insecurities. And they've just existed in my brain and my thought patterns for years and years and years and years. And I've never had the awareness or tools to actually examine those and question them until recently. And so that's exciting to me because it's very liberating. You can take a lot of, you can kind of take charge of your own thinking, but again, that requires space and time with yourself and reflection, and that's a practice, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like uh, what you're saying is in a way related to critical thought, right? Having the ability to question the information that is coming to you from the outside, but also from the inside, with your own beliefs and the the way that patterns revolve around each other inside your own psyche. I think that's that's definitely that has always been in a way very fundamental and useful all throughout human history. And even more so nowadays.
Yeah. I love to hear you say, like, mention critical thought, because I really feel so strongly, this is one of my strongest convictions, that the developing critical thought is one of the best things any human being can do. And like back to the AI thing, there's a bit of a mass reaction in some ways to the advances of AI, and understandably, a lot of people are afraid of what that means for the future. I mean, anything that we don't know, like the unknown is scary. So like, but having critical thought and being like, wait a minute, being objective, being like, how can technology serve us, but then how also can I create a space that's detached for myself, that's detached from like, what's happening technologically or what's happening in the world. Like, the fact that you mentioned critical thought just really fires me up, because it's such a powerful tool. And any information that you receive from someone, even who appears to be in a position of authority, it's such a superpower if you can, instead of just accepting what people say at face value, question it and see it with a critical through a critical lens. And that just really gives you a competitive edge if you have that critical thought.
Yeah, the fear that arises for me is in relation to this with a tool like ChatGPT, right? Which is like like an artificial god in some way. That's kind of how I see it.
Me too.
With the way that it's presented, the way that it's built, and the relationship that we seem to have with it. It's it gives an answer to every question that we have. And while there are definitely people out there that use it critically and perhaps question the answers that it's providing, there there is this fear that there are as many, if not more, people that will not question the answers that it's giving, in the same way that collectively it took us a long time to question the answers that, for example, religion has given us in the past, right? And I'm certain that you have some thoughts on this, because it seems to be uh, maybe part of our evolution, but also part of our genetic, not genetic, psychological makeup, in a way, collectively speaking, to sort of attach ourselves to an idea, or rather an idea attaches itself to us, and it grows and expands like a virus. And collectively we start to believe it, so it becomes real, and it becomes a lot more difficult to question it. So I feel like this is a fear that comes up for me when I look at this new technology. It's this propensity in us to not question, to just go with what everybody else thinks, and to accept whatever the overall narrative is. Although, of course, this is it's going to be probably a little bit different with ChatGPT than having something like a holy book or something, to create this unified narrative. Um, but yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, on that fear, so to speak, or on that possibility, I guess?
I imagine that when electricity became uh, a thing that the common person had access to, I don't even know like the history of electricity, but I'm imagining it's like the 1800s, around then at some point when like electricity became available like in the common household. um I'm sure that was scary to a lot of people. And when the internet became, I mean, what the internet is today compared to what it was 20, 30 years ago, it's a totally different beast. But when the internet began to uh I don't know, make
Appear.
itself, yeah, appear, make itself available to like the common user, I'm sure that was scary to a lot of people too, because
Mm.
there's suddenly all this potential for transmitting dangerous information, or exposure to who knows what. And whenever a new technology comes around and becomes accessible on a large scale, I think there's plenty of reason for concern, because, like I said before, these things are tools, and a tool can be used um, in a productive way or in a destructive way. So it's just good to be mindful of that, and to be aware that things like AI and the internet and electricity aren't inherently bad. They're simply tools that we can use in productive ways or in destructive ways. So I think it's healthy to have some concerns, but it's also useful to see it's useful to try and figure out how these things can serve us, because they can, especially AI, like, and ChatGPT. I mean, I've used ChatGPT in so many ways, not even for work, but just in my personal life, to that have saved me so much time and just leveraged efficiency in such a powerful way. Like, if I hear about a book in a podcast or something, and I'm too lazy to, buy the book and read it, I'll go onto ChatGPT and to like ask it to summarize the book in key points. And that way, if I don't have, or if I don't want to make time to read a whole book, I can at least get a good sense of what that book is teaching within seconds, and things like that. It's such a leveraging of time. Like, time is the most precious resource that we have, and any tool that can help us, use time more efficiently, in my opinion, is a good thing. So that's just one example of, how something like AI can be used as a tool for productivity, but it's healthy
Mm.
to have concerns.
I was going to ask if you have been using AI in your own workflow, and I guess that's kind of like, and you already answered that question. But have you used it for music, or would you consider using it for music in any way?
With music, I feel at such a crossroads these days. It's like what I was saying before. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if I don't know if my career is going to involve music for much longer, or to like a great extent in the future. Uh,
Mm.
I still care a lot about soundtrack music, and I have a soundtrack that I started working on over a year ago, that basically sat on a shelf for a year because I, was going through a lot of stuff and focusing on other projects. But I need to finish that soundtrack because I put a lot of work into it, and it deserves to be finished. And in the future, I can see myself, working on some other soundtrack projects. So maybe there's still some music left in my professional path. But yeah, it's becoming harder and harder for me to see that making sense pursuing a career in music, because it's so saturated as an industry. Like I was saying before, the barrier to entry for creating and publishing music has never been as low as it is today. And
Mm.
so that just means it's harder than it's ever been to, be a professional. I'm not saying it's impossible, but is that what I want. I don't think it is anymore, even though for many years I did think it was. But so much of that work, just like I was saying before, entails sitting alone in front of a screen. And more I'm realizing that I want to be connected with people and having a human exchange, rather than sitting at a desk. I think I've done enough sitting at a desk for for yeah. I don't know. I don't really know what the future looks like for me, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's kind of my train of thought these days.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I remember when I started studying concept art, there was a similar thought that appeared, um, a kind of a realization in a way that I didn't want to spend my time sitting in front of a computer doing work for somebody else,
Yeah.
um, creating artworks and illustration for somebody else's projects. Um, so I think there's this
I
this
think
I
it's
sorry.
healthy. I think it's healthy to have those questionings because then you don't trap yourself into something that you don't feel fulfilled in, and you're actually looking for other avenues. And maybe sometimes in life you have to try a bunch of different things before you find something that really, really clicks, even if you are passionate about, art and creating art, which we both are.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it's healthy to have those questionings where you're like, is this really what I want to be doing for the next X amount of years?
hmm. Yeah, this kind of relates back to the critical thinking that we were discussing before. Um,
Yeah.
I guess it's a good idea to have, to understand, to discover what is it that you want to do and to be, regardless of what the world might tell you that you should do or be. Um, I just find it a bit difficult, um, to. I see it becoming a little bit more difficult to do that in today's world. Again, relating back to the speed at which it's going, and we were kind of talking about before about having the time and the space um, to question and to use critical thinking to discover more about yourself. Um, but you've also mentioned that a lot of the work that you're doing now is in a way dedicated to that, right? So what would you say is next for you? Like where do you see where do you see yourself going next? Sort of if you have any kind of thoughts uh, on this in relation to self-discovery.
Well, my real passion these days has really moved from art and creating art to psychedelics and
Mhm.
sharing the sharing and exploration of psychedelics. Um, Last year, as you know, I had a lot of different psychedelic experiences with various plants, and it really like turned me on to this completely new perspective on life and the world and how to live a life in the world. And that feels a lot more real to me now than sitting behind a desk producing music feels, or even
Mm,
illustrating. And it's quite difficult because I've loved making music and illustrating for so long, and I still love them. Actually, I haven't stopped loving them. It's just that the way that you spend your life, the older you get, the more careful you have to be about how you live and how you spend your time, because you know anyway, not to go on a tangent, but psychedelics is psychedelics are where it's at for me now, and I really want to share that experience with more people. And I've started holding one-on-one sessions with magic mushrooms. I'm doing an introduction to psychedelics for someone in a week who's never tried psychedelics before, and that will involve a low, like a relatively low, but nevertheless therapeutic dose of magic mushrooms. And I'm excited. I'm excited about that because something that I realized, or I think I've known this for a while, but I kind of put it into words just yesterday, is that I really want to create an experience for people. I want to create experiences, and I'm excited about making a nice space and, making people feel um, welcomed and safe and excited about their personal journey and about, growing and healing with psychedelics, and just in general in life, not necessarily only through the use of psychedelics, but yeah, I want to do more work that involves human connections and being in a room with another person or people, um and yeah, just that kind of explore, and that's creative too. That's a creative it's a creative practice, because when you create a space and you create an atmosphere and an experience for someone or for people, that requires a lot of creativity, and it requires a lot of care for something to be really enjoyable and pleasant and safe, and all of that requires thought. And so that's all, that is actually also like a creative pursuit in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also art. You could make the argument that it's also there's an art to it for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds very beautiful. And meaningful as well. Especially, yeah, as we're I think I hope that there will be a sort of a renaissance, or maybe there is already. I'm just not as aware of it as I would like to be. A renaissance of of deep human connection, especially as the digital world is becoming more and more overly saturated with content. This is kind of what we were talking about in the previous episode as well. Uh, as AI gets bigger and better at replicating real life, um, there's like a blurring of uh, of the confines of the walls between what is real and what isn't real, and in a way, this is also going to create a need for people to go back to nature, hopefully, and to interacting with each other. Um, I think
yeah, I love
that's
that. I
yeah.
love that. I love the fact that you use the word renaissance, and I think that's already happening. You just have to know where to look. And I also think we can take a lot of responsibility in creating that in our own way, of just like, hanging out with people, getting coffee, having an actual face-to-face conversation with someone. Those are ways that we can like create that renaissance of human connection, because there is like a loneliness epidemic in the world at the moment, and there is
Yeah.
people are probably feel more isolated than they ever have in the past, due to just the way that social media works, and a lot of I mean, we don't need to get into that because I know we're already on the same page with that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm with you, and I think that renaissance is happening, and we can be a part of it.
Hmm.
And we can be voices for that too in the world, of encouraging human connection over, isolation.
Hmm. Yeah, that's needed. It feels very needed. it
Absolutely.
feels like we're collectively crying out for something like that. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah. So if someone was curious about the work that you've done in the past or the work that you're doing now, is there any place that you would point people to? Or I know you said that you're currently transitioning into a different realm of artistic expression and of where you would like uh, to to take your brand and your work. But are there any places that you would invite people to check out and to visit in relation to your work and your socials, like your website or your gallery, your YouTube?
My website is attentionlabel.com, and all of my stuff is linked on there.
Mhm.
And if anyone is curious about psychedelics or wants to experience an introduction to the world of psychedelics in a safe environment and in a very deeply meaningful and powerful way, then they can contact me because I'm starting to do this more and more seriously now, and also I'm I aspire to be international with this practice.
Mhm.
I want to like I feel like a citizen of the world, and I want to provides this service and the experience of the psychedelic journey in a therapeutic context to anyone, anywhere. So yeah, I'm putting that out there, because this is something that I feel so strongly about and so connected to and so excited about is exploring psychedelics and sharing it with other people, in the right way. But as far as like my creative work goes and getting in touch with me is concerned, it's all on my website, which is attentionlabel.com.
Mhm. Mhm. And you also have a second channel, right? Is that right? For where you kind of focus on interviews about this, about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
psychedelic experience.
totally. So that's linked on my website too. Everything's linked on my website. So I have this channel called Death Hippie, which you were my first episode
Yeah.
on, or you were my first episode of like interview. It's basically interviews and conversations on the topic of psychedelics. Yeah, that's called Death Hippie. Currently have 365 subscribers, but that's linked on my website as well.
Yeah, I'll make sure that that's in the video description as well as featured on the channel for people to find it, um,
Thank you.
especially if they're interested in exploring more of this topic.
Yeah.
And most of your, or if not all of the music that you've produced so far is on Spotify. Is that correct? I'm actually curious. This is just on a kind of a side note. If you'd like to touch upon this briefly, I'm not a musician, but if if a musician is listening to this and maybe they haven't put their music anywhere so far, would Spotify be a good choice in your opinion, since you have most of it there? And I'll make sure to add that to the video description as well for people that are curious about the music that you've produced. But yeah, is that a good channel for musicians to place their music on? What would you say?
Yeah, so Spotify is basically to music what YouTube is to videos. So
Okay.
if you want to upload a video, chances are you're going to upload it to YouTube. And with music, like you have Apple Music and Tidal and there's a bunch of others, but Spotify is like the YouTube of music.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And is that can you sort of monetize that? Does that work in that sense? Or I'm obviously not entirely sure how that works, but
Yeah, it is monetized, but it's notorious. It's quite famously not super profitable. I can't remember
Okay.
what the number is, but for each play on Spotify, it's like 0.000 something cents. So it's this is like for years it's been like a topic of discussion, the fact that um so yeah, to answer your question, Spotify is monetized, but to actually make money on Spotify, you need to be, in like the top tiers of
Hmm.
listeners.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll yeah, as I said, I'll make sure that that's there. Um, I guess 0.00001 is still better than than nothing. It's a it's a start. It all adds up, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being part of this and for exploring this conversation with me, especially in regards to everything that we've talked about with meaning and the way that we navigate the modern world. I feel like that's very useful and that's very relevant to where we are nowadays. So um, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for that.
Thank you. That was a good interview.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You did.
And thank you for being a part of this. I hope this conversation has been useful. Please do check out the other episodes. Each and every artist has some very unique wisdom to share with you. So you'll find it here on my channel as well as Spotify, where I'm trying to update the playlist as soon as each episode comes out. And do check out the links below. I always make sure to include the artist's website and social media channels if you would like to check out their art and everything that they do. And I will see you very soon for the next conversation. Take care.